Yesterday, it all came crashing down for Hunter Biden. His sweetheart deal, which tried to sneak in broad immunities, was struck down by Judge Noreika. And right now, you've got people on the right praising the judge, saying, good job sniffing this one out. Meanwhile, you've got people on the left saying the judge is trying to protect Hunter Biden from a Donald Trump vengeance or revenge. Interesting. The story is this. Yesterday, Hunter Biden was supposed to plead guilty. I talked about it in the morning, but by the afternoon, the plea deal had fallen apart. They had said maybe it's going to come back. They're negotiating, and then it's been put on hold. What happens here is downright shocking. We got transcripts from the courtroom, and it's crazier than we know. Basically, what happened was the prosecution hid immunity provisions in a deferment program, effectively behind the plea agreement. I'm not a lawyer, so it's harder for me to explain. I'm a lawyer. Actually, I don't know if a lawyer could explain it better because they might use jargon. But the idea is they say, hey, here are these things you're pleading guilty to in terms of taxes. You read through it and it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's fine. Then there's this deferment program on the gun issue. But within it were deep and broad provisions for immunity, which could ultimately make Hunter Biden immune to everything. Now, I find it funny that the left is arguing the judge is trying to protect Hunter Biden from Trump when the judge asked about FARA violations and whether or not there was an ongoing investigation. I got to break this down for you. I got to read. I'll read to you what some of these lawyers are saying. But this is the story we have from Newsweek. Hunter Biden judge trying to protect him from Donald Trump, according to this attorney. I find it absolutely laughable. But the scandal is deeper than that because we did talk about this yesterday. Take a look at this. Judge says Hunter Biden legal team apparently misrepresented identity to court clerk. Yeah, this was yesterday morning. Apparently the scandal gets crazier. They were trying to get negative information, emotion, removed by pretending to be Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee, I believe. This is a crazy story. Right now, there is a grand jury convening to indict Donald Trump. This is where we're at, my friends. Now, I'm gonna wait on this story until we get developments. But as it goes, they're saying Trump may be indicted today over January 6th. And if he is, they are going to say insurrection. Therefore, he is removed from the ballot. Then who's left standing? Ron DeSantis. So maybe there is a path for Ron, and it's not through the traditional means. But welcome to modern civil war. I do find it beautifully ironic that a provision made post-Civil War to stop insurrectionists from being in government would be used as a weapon which could lead to a civil war. The idea that Donald Trump would be removed over January 6th when we all know it's a lie. One side is in plain view gaming the system and spitting in our faces. The other side is saying, well, this may reach the level of inquiry. Republicans saying, maybe we'll have an impeachment inquiry. Maybe an inquiry? So you think after a bit more corruption, you might ask the question as to whether or not it warrants removal from office? Absolutely stunning on the part of Republicans. Take a look at this from the Washington Post. Let's read what they say, and then I'll show you the breakdown from a former federal prosecutor and the transcripts. The Washington Post writes why Hunter Biden's plea deal wasn't approved on Wednesday. A federal judge exposed a rift over immunity provisions and questioned whether the structure of the deal was legal. Hunter Biden walked into court in Delaware expecting to plead guilty to 2 minor crimes and avoid jail. But the plea deal ended up on hold, at least temporarily. And if prosecutors and defense lawyers can't work out some structural problems, Biden could face a criminal trial. On Wednesday, Hunter Biden headed to a courtroom not far from where he grew up expecting to plead guilty to failure to pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. We get it. He reached a tentative plea agreement in June to keep the gun charge off his record and avoid jail time, provided that he meets conditions over a 2-year period, including staying drug-free and not buying a firearm. He's got to get a job, too. That was one of the latest ones. They say that the plea deal initially did not protect Hunter Biden from prosecution for other potential charges in connection with a long-running government investigation into his business dealings. When the federal judge asked Hunter Biden if he would plead guilty knowing he could still face additional charges, he said no. Prosecutors in the courtroom maintained this was part of the agreement all along. Then we misunderstood. We're ripping it up. Biden lawyer Chris Clark snapped at them. The two sides then quickly reworked the deal to include immunity for certain tax, drug, and gun charges between 2014 and 19. essentially the main time period covered by the investigation. The judge then raised constitutional questions. She noted that the immunity provisions were tucked into the agreement involving the gun charge, which she does not actually have to approve. That's because diversion agreements are forged between prosecutors and defense attorneys. Plea agreements, on the other hand, must be approved by a judge. But the diversion agreement includes language saying the judge could revive the gun charge if Hunter Biden violated the terms of the agreement. The judge said she did not think she has the power to do so. So what happens next? Yada, yada, yada. The framing you get from these articles in the corporate press is very, very interesting, because let me show you the breakdown from Will Scharf, a former federal prosecutor. And it's a bit more interesting than that. Now, the Washington Post makes it seem very simple. The judge was just like, well, what about this? I don't know if I can do that. In reality, the judge was yelling. We're getting this transcript where the judge was like, you're putting me in an impossible position. I can't approve this. What's going on? Basically, they have this gun charge, as the Washington Post even said, that the judge does not have to approve. It's a private agreement, but includes broad immunity. You see, they're trying to pull a fast one. Will Scharf on Twitter, he is candidate for Missouri Attorney General. He says, based on conversations with people who are in the courtroom today, and my experience as a former federal prosecutor, I think I know the full story of what happened with the Hunter Biden plea agreement blow up this morning. Bear with me, because this is a little complicated. Typically, if the government is offering to a defendant that it will either drop charges or decline to bring new charges in return for the defendant's guilty plea, the plea is structured under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 11C1A. An agreement not to prosecute Hunter for FARA violations or other crimes in return for his pleading guilty to the tax misdemeanors, for example, would usually be a C1A plea. This is open, transparent, subject to judicial approval, etc. In Hunter's case, according to what folks in the courtroom have told me, Hunter's plea was structured under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 11C1B, which is usually just a plea in return for a joint sentencing recommendation only, and contained no information on its face about other potential charges, and contained no clear agreement by DOJ to forego prosecution of other charges. Instead, DOJ and Hunter's lawyers effectively hid that part of the agreement in what was publicly described as a pretrial diversion agreement relating to a S-922G3 gun charge against Hunter for being a drug user in possession of a firearm. That pretrial diversion agreement, as written, was actually much broader than just the gun charge. If Hunter were to complete probation, the pretrial diversion agreement prevented DOJ from ever bringing charges against Hunter for any crimes relating to the offense conduct discussed in the plea agreement, which was purposely written to include his foreign influence peddling operations in China and elsewhere. You see how they pulled it off. The plea agreement includes this stuff, but he's just pleading in Texas. And then the diversion program references the plea agreement, which would be approved by the judge, but then says he wouldn't be charged on those issues. The judge, apparently the plan was the judge would not care about the gun thing and just be like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. This one looks good on tax charges, thus tricking the judge into signing off on an agreement which would grant Hunter Biden broad immunities. Amazing. Let's read more. So they put the facts in the plea agreement, but put their non-prosecution agreement in the pretrial diversion agreement, effectively hiding the full scope of what DOJ was offering and Hunter was obtaining through these proceedings. Hunter's upside from this deal was vast immunity from further prosecution if he finished a couple years of probation, and the public wouldn't be any the wiser because none of this was clearly stated on the face of the plea agreement, as would normally be the case. Now imagine Donald Trump gets elected and he says, we're going after Hunter Biden and the Biden family, and they'd go, we have an agreement. That'd be unconstitutional. This judge saw that and went, what? I can't approve this. And now you've got these lefties being like, the judge is actually on our side. Judge Noreika smelled a rat. She understood that the lawyers were trying to paint her into a corner and hide the ball. Instead, she backed DOJ and Hunter's lawyers into a corner by pulling all the details out into the open and then indicating that she wasn't going to approve a deal as broad as what she had discovered. DOJ, attempting to save face and save its case, then stated on the record the investigation into Hunter was ongoing and that Hunter remained susceptible to prosecution under FARA. Hunter's lawyers exploded. They clearly believed that FARA was covered under the deal because, as written, the pretrial diversion agreement language was broad enough to cover it. They blew up the deal. Hunter pled not guilty, and that's the current state of play. And so here we are. Hunter's lawyers and the DOJ are going to go off and try to pull together a new set of agreements, likely narrower, to satisfy Judge Noreika. Fortunately, I doubt if FARA or any charges related to Hunter's foreign influence peddling will be included, which leaves open the possibility of further investigations leading to further prosecutions. This is crazy. Take a look at this from Jennifer Van Laar. Jennifer is MG Ed, Red State, BU alum, America's sweetheart, her Twitter profile says. I've been reading the official transcript of Hunter Biden's hearing today, 110 pages, and not all the way through, but something that strikes me so far. U.S. Attorney Weiss's office was really trying to game the system because they hid the agreement to not charge various things related to the tax case in the diversion agreement, which covers the gun charge, instead of in the memorandum of plea, because that changes the type of plea it is under the FRCP and the role of the judge. The judge and her staff could not find another case in which a plea agreement was done this way. Take a look at this. We've got some images. It says, so the court, all right, we're going to discuss the agreement in a bit, but for now, let me say, by the way, I didn't get a copy of paragraph 15 of the agreement, but the parties provided me with a copy of that agreement prior to this hearing. So that's what I'm going to quote for the moment. Paragraph 15 of the diversion agreement states the United States agrees not to criminally prosecute Biden outside of the terms of this agreement for any federal crimes encompassed by the attached statement of facts, attachment A to the diversion agreement, and the statement of facts attached as Exhibit 1 to the memorandum of plea agreement filed the same day. This agreement does not provide any protection against prosecution for any future conduct by Biden or by any of his affiliated businesses. And just so we're clear, I think you already answered this, sir, but are you relying on that promise in connection with your agreement to accept the memorandum of plea agreement and plead guilty? The defendant, this is Hunter Biden, said, yes, Your Honor. The court says, if that provision were not valid or not enforceable, would you accept the memorandum of plea agreement? And he said, no. There's more. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about this agreement to not prosecute. This is from the court. The agreement not to prosecute is in the gun case, but it also includes crimes related to the tax case. So we looked through a bunch of diversion agreements that we have access to, and we couldn't find anything that had anything similar to that. So have you ever seen, I think I just asked you this, but have you ever seen a diversion agreement where the agreement not to prosecute is so broad that it encompasses crimes in a different case? Mr. Wise says, no, I would say, Your Honor, I don't think it is broad in a sense that the judge responds, we're going to talk about that. You can sit down. Now is an agreement not to bring charges or an agreement to drop charges typically something that is included in a memorandum of a plea agreement. Basically, the judge said, hold on there a minute. Man, this is truly depraved stuff. Talk about scandalous. We are, as much as I hate the internet and Twitter and all that for all the bad, it really does bring about a whole lot of good, because you don't see this in the Washington Post article, just vague references. Newsweek writes the judge was trying to protect Hunter Biden. Are you serious? The judge is like, I've never seen a diversion program on a gun charge, a drug and gun thing, have broad protections totally unrelated to the guns and talking about tax and FARA. Let's break it down. A dude walks in to a courtroom and they're like, you were doing a bunch of drugs and you had a gun. It's like, yes. So we're gonna put you through a diversion program. We don't want you to go to jail. It can make things worse. You're just gonna do probation, and then everything is hunky dory. Yes, it says here in this plea agreement we can't charge you for the bribery, for bank robbery, for aggravated assault. Like, none of that has anything to do with the fact that he was a drug user who bought a gun and lied on a document or whatever. But they snuck it in. That was the scam. It was brilliant. I don't think they actually care about the gun charge. They were trying to find a way to have something that would slip past the judge, but create a binding legal agreement preventing the federal government from going after Hunter Biden, thus shielding the Biden family from future prosecution. The idea that the judge was protecting Hunter Biden, I think, is silly. I think the judge was protecting herself. A lot of people are like, yeah, you go, Judge Noreika. You smelled a rat. You did a good job. I think the judge isn't thinking that at all. I think the judge is simply like, whoa. What am I agreeing to? Let me tell y'all a story. I'll keep it a little bit vague. But I had some friends who agreed to be in a documentary. And the documentary was produced by some corporate press. And I'm like, why would you agree to this? Like, why would you let these people film you? They're going to lie about you anyway. I don't know. But, people on the right often give these interviews anyway, assuming. But to be fair, the freedom faction type individuals, post-liberal, conservative, etc., have learned their lesson in that regard. There was a document that was being given to some prominent conservative personalities a waiver for the documentary, and they were signing it. They were like, you want to sign this? It just says that we're allowed to use your likeness for the documentary. And they're like, okay. And so I'm sitting there. I'm not in this documentary, by the way. I didn't sign anything. And I look at it and I'm like, yeah, don't sign this. And my friends asked me why. I said, this agreement would allow them to use your likeness and image in perpetuity forever for any reason. They're not having you sign a waiver that grants them the right to a documentary. You're signing a waiver that they could put up a billboard with your face on it and call you a Nazi. That they could run commercials with your face on it. You see, this is what people sneak into these agreements, hoping you don't understand. Now, to be fair, a contract like that isn't enforceable, right? If you were going to agree to be in a documentary and they said sign this release form and it was broad and allowed them to do crazy things, let's say they did put up a billboard, you'd sue them. They'd say it's all here in writing. They knew. You'd go to court and say, no, we agreed to do a documentary. We never agreed on advertisements or whatever. It is entirely possible the judge just says, come on, no reasonable person is going to genuinely believe that by agreeing to be in a documentary, you'd insult them in a billboard or on TV. However, the judge could uphold it. So it's 50-50. The idea is, and I bring this up a lot, contracts have words, but judges make the decision. And if it becomes apparent to a judge that one party was trying to manipulate and scam the other party, and now they're like, sorry, you signed power of attorney, they're just going to be like, get out of here. That's not the spirit of the agreement. That's why judges exist, because they're people. The world is not just a machine where it's like, sorry, you signed it, and it says, I get your car. Well, you don't. It doesn't work that way. It can, though. It can. Right? This guy could come out and be like, we explained to them we needed their rights for promotion, and we would be doing these things. And the judge is going to be like, okay, I mean, you signed it. That's reasonable. It makes sense. However, it just depends on what they ended up doing. This is the thing about these agreements, right? To be completely honest, even if the judge did end up signing this, it does not mean anything. Okay, to be fair, it means a little bit. It means that it would be harder for Trump to go after him. But look, man, there's always a way. There's always a way. Look at what they're doing to Trump and Trump associates right now. The current news, as we were waiting, is live coverage. Trump grand jury probing 2020 election arrives at courthouse. Trump has said he's a target of a criminal investigation into efforts to overturn his electoral defeat from President Joe Biden. Now, did Trump do anything wrong? Of course not. Sorry, that's just the truth. On January 6th, Donald Trump said, stop. He said, be peaceful. He could have issued a stronger, broader statement earlier. But before, I believe it was right around the time the breach happened, Trump said, we respect law enforcement, be peaceful, et cetera, et cetera. He then came out and said, everyone go home. You know, he gave a video statement. Big tech social media companies, they deleted those posts. Yeah, they deleted them to hide the fact that Trump was saying no. Trump said, we're going to peacefully have our voices heard. There was a permitted rally on the other side of the Capitol building. And then you have certain individuals, we'll just leave it at this, tearing down barricades, advocating for storming the Capitol, and they're blaming Trump for doing it. Trump, you know, look, I think Trump wants revenge. I think he'll fire people. Good. But the idea that he's some like mastermind 4D chess playing guy is just not true. Trump really was bumbling about. To see what happened on January 6th and how he responded to it, it's like it's just so clear he did not know how to handle these high intensity situations. Same thing with May 29th, the 529 insurrection. There are certainly people who disagree with me. I had this conversation with Michael Malice and Roseanne Barr. I said that if the police on May 29th stood down and the far left extremists who set fire to St. John's Church and the guard post were able to actually breach the White House, Trump would be president right now. And, Michael disagreed. And I think Ian disagreed, saying like the media would just claim Trump betrayed our country and allowed extremists. Maybe he'd be fighting the media. But it's very difficult for the media to attack Trump when it was leftists, Antifa, and far left extremists who would have committed this act. Instead, what happened was the police cleared them out, and the media narrative became Donald Trump mercilessly beats peaceful protesters. What's the better narrative for Trump? Certainly, some would say Trump allowing extremists to storm the White House is not the better narrative. But then they just came out and said Trump mercilessly beats peaceful protesters. When it came to January 6th, if they actually were to stop the protests and the rioters, media wouldn't talk about it at all. because it was right-wing individuals. But because they stormed in, now it's the insurrection, and they are weaponizing this against Trump. Now, ultimately, if the far left did breach the White House or burn down a church or something like that, I think it would be impossible to ignore. And my evidence for this is Andy Ngo. When Andy Ngo was mercilessly beaten in the streets, even CNN had to acknowledge it. It made them look bad. They couldn't ignore it. Andy Ngo was just walking down the street filming, and far-left extremists mercilessly beat him and left him bloodied up. Even CNN, Brian Stelter, was forced to say it was wrong. Imagine what would happen if on 5/29, when Trump was rushed to the bunker, he put out a statement saying, please remain peaceful. We don't want anyone to get hurt. And then they ransacked, they burned this building down. You see, conservatives, Republicans, whatever, they don't get it. They keep saying we're going to play by the rules. Meanwhile, the other side says we will burn to the ground to destroy our enemies. That's a reality. The ends don't justify the means. I'm not saying that the Republicans should break the rules. I'm saying they need to start utilizing the system to the best of their abilities, in which they should prosecute people who are committing crimes, call for impeachment, etc. But they ain't doing it. They're not. Kevin McCarthy says, this may rise to the level of an impeachment inquiry. Seriously? This may rise to the level of an inquiry? You know what that means? It means he's not sure whether or not he should actually look into whether or not we should consider impeachment of Joe Biden. That's incredible, isn't it? After everything we've seen so far. Bravo, Republicans. I think the reality is the Republicans are with the Democrats. It's one big uniparty. It's one big club, and you ain't in it. And it's the same club they used to beat you over the head with. Shout out to George Carlin on that line. That's the reality. Kevin McCarthy's not your friend. Mitch McConnell's not your friend. The Republicans are speed bumps to stop you, the American voter, from voting out the corrupt establishment elites. So we should have an impeachment of Joe Biden. I mean, it's plain as day. And look, maybe you want to make an argument about corruption and the liberals are going to argue no. Fine. How about 25th Amendment? How about Biden is incapable, is incompetent, and needs to retire? Hey, I'll say the same thing for Mitch McConnell. They should be removed for medical reasons. I mean, no disrespect. But come on, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But this is where we are. Republicans are basically running diversion for Democrats as Democrats rip apart anyone who stands in the way of the corrupt, diseased establishment machine. With Donald Trump, we had this brief moment, as crass as it was, of the American people actually voting for somebody they wanted. Now, a lot of Americans don't like Trump, that I get. But with Biden, once again, we're back to your rulers are in control once again. What did George Carlin say? You have owners. They own you. I don't agree with George Carlin and everything, but the dude was pretty rad. And this is where we are. With Donald Trump, he broke that machine. And now they're trying to make sure he can't win. And that includes the Republicans as well. They want to make sure he doesn't win. They want control once again. But you can't. People like me are not leaving. And there's nothing you can do to stop this wave in the culture. Blame Ron Paul, I guess. So many people, young people, heard that message of anti-war, anti-centralized banks, etc., government corruption, and we want populism. The establishment machine is a disgusting zombie trying to latch on to the reins of power. We'll see how that works out for him. It may. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Perhaps we'll be discussing Donald Trump's indictment. Stick around. Thanks for hanging out. You can support us by becoming a member at timcast.com or buying Cast Brew coffee at castbrew.com. New blends are out. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all at 1.